Qonaya yakuhi stekat Johan. Yachana. Wan qanins kalletsikwa ataya adat. Wuchin yukhakakhtutla at. Wasa atbune. Wasa has to kakao daha. Ya halil kohas. Akhu awe ushik'éiyi sgóon yi kaya ye hasuti. Aya ishan dain yu has kautle shu. Ya akhu awe tlelqa. Tlel has to toa ushko. Ha yu katangi ka hakusti. Kusti. Ajoy has a kawa kach edach aya has outle ooze. Tlel awas kukunachowe ha tu ye ti koa. Kachalte kat ku du sahat lat ki ka. Has to tu ye ti. Yaha yu katangi ka hakusti. Ajoy wasach tu ye ke. Kadena ya kai ha yu katangi. Konea ya yishakugu. Ya ach tu ye ke. Has tu tlawuchi. Ya harshil ko has. Akhu aya. Has a jiwanak. Ka has to yatki. Ka has to dachkankiyan. Kel has to jit has our tea. Ha yu katangi. Goshe has a waji. Kel ushke at. Has to kade kukwatitsu. Kel has to toa ushko. Chach the katataya. Has to dachkankiyan. Ka has to yatki. Kaya nachaya yewuti. Titla antin kakhisakhan hasakawa ak. Shulsin aya. Joya shulsin aya. Hayukatangi kahakosti. Ya yidat kwa kone aya yukayetani. Singit kinach. Gagi aya. Has yaw dekun. Ya hasil ko has. Wasa has tituwasagu yikait khasa was ahi. Akaye kwati. Yukatank aya. Just on away ke hagachlitzi. Asaneix awe hayukatangi. Achawe kagachtu ak atgachtu leyechi yachana. Yigo ayachwan. Chawasa ayakai aku. Kakakwati. Hagokikt kakakwati. Hatuka ayakakwati. Ye awe hatu atil de kat Johan. Ye awe haye jene yank. Wuj in ye jitunei yata adat. Wasa hatu wasagu. Hajitas awati. Ya yeke at. Ya halil kohas. Ataya gachtu at an. Aka hatachkan kiyan. Ha ite kaku. Has to jite gachtu ti. Aka awe chlisidain. At haskach layech. Ye awe hatu wasagu. Yide kakwaha yachana. Aka chakuta dat. Wujin yukagachtu saat. Wasa atune tliatke. Wush kandachutu da art. Anach ya andagan yech. Adate yukagachtu saat. Kaha yukatangi dati chagachtune. Gunchis Johan. Yekecha. Yigo aychwan. Yid koaha. Adu sadu tuasagu. Ya yidat yukayatangi.
Finish cheese.
Adu sakshwe yukakwatan.
I'm going to say a little bit. Growing up I'm from Juneau, and Juneau has its rich history. but also a lot of destruction, not only of landmarks and villages and sites, but it went with the language. And as a child of parents who both physically suffered a great deal, my way of coming from it, and it's like I see myself as coming from the ashes, and that is toowú ushik'éiyi jidach gush lahash ushik'éiyi. And gotta keep our language on the land so it is not forgotten. It's a parable I heard on Facebook, but it's a good one. Because, we need to keep the names on the land. It's not just us that's healing. It comes back from the generation before. There were the strong ones too, not only the ones that survived, but the ones that are there to guide us. Achlachli pas shakakuni dakoedi sa tate yachtahit adahunuchas gachgun kagwantan Tlein ushik'éiyi. These are my family that I draw strength from. Yakun gachgun kagwantan. Shansuk from Salmon Creek, and Ish from Berners Bay. They taught and they delivered a lot of strength for me. And so that's what I am going to remember as I journey on. Goodness, cheese. Thank you.
Jeez. Ushik'éiyi.
Cliff kunach out away, we kusti haj asye. Cha sakat ka you au yudliad ina. Hashigun kahashkasni du ich at wushlut du ich at wushlutu nach at wusaach. Toowú tu yes away whoosh in we clat ka at gatu adi. We tringet gagan at us tu. Tlein yagi away at ushik'éiyi ka cowdekit. Shieda hani tauk ha adatki awata. We ushik'éiyi kat away ha adatki awata sgóon ushik'éiyi. We ushik'éiyi kat ajika waka we atki slith du ich sgóon enach tanik. We adat it tis Augustine we ku shkahadan aye at wune we atkiet we adatki tis shieda hin adatki tis ku what a good niste. Shieda hin tauk sakat ya slinget ku'u kakukam jake kach. Guna ya kwan tlif ka dachchan. Sakat ka kud pas wujigit. Kua tlein yagi away sgóon ushik'éiyi sakit. Dehwa we adatki kuh what a good neste. We adat chet at wusiti achaya yagi we at wusku ye hasstashnig adaya ka akla du ish kishduk ka akla du ish kishduk ka akla du kla kashakla yahyeti uchle
Sheesh. Yeah. Latseen ten away you khayatan. Sheesh. Okay. Qasaku wasaat na name yata. Qanakhawi kutakhik takan. Sheesh. Sukeka. Qasaku. Khalqin.
أخليلك وسأتوتي إشان وآه ونخسوا إتول ينيق ونخسا إقاخ إتلاقيسها قائيش قائخليل إنجي كدنيك إتليلك أونا إشان أختو أسنيق يأيا أختو يتي قوة أختو سجو نلت إيغوت إتو كيكوخ سجو قوال كشه يوتيق يأيخ سقايه تلخواسة أختو قلقي إقاخ إشكالنيك لنجد قينخ خان كانانيك يا يكي لنجد شتو خلتو كنالشيشك أخليلكو
Kecha. Sheesh. Asach tu tlaqay kach takat Johan. Kecha. Okay.
Yay, yay, Khatiye, in the 1970s. Sanu, Teen, Ushik'éiyi, sgóon, Awe, ushik'éiyi, Ade, sgóon. In most on Tlein, sgóonash, Kuchita, Awe, Hachchana, Deich, sgóon, Kuchita. Hachchana, sgóon, Hachchana, Institute. Hachchana, Institute, sgóon, da, Tlein, Hosakuk, you do, Tlein, Yis, Shah, Hasyeyati. Ashkujeta, Tlein, ushik'éiyi, Hach'éiyi, Zantikahines, Ayanatla, Shakte, Awe, Ye, Gugang, sgóon, Zantikahine, sgóon, Tlein, Awe. Ya, sgóon, ye, Khatiye, Awe, Trakteen, ye, Khosati. Khitikat, talk, eating, tringet, on track me, Awe, Mount Edgecombe, sgóon, sheep cuff, yati. Twat, teye, gusa, kawayik, yagu, wujikak, World War II, nach, ik, ha, kun, agu, Tlein, yi, field, you, kunigi, yati. Each, tak, ite, dech, ya yigi, dach, ach owe gu wu yis sha tlek has tlek utusa pu.
Jeez, kecha. Then you eatan, kecha, jeez. Adu satsu. Ushik'éiyi, that.
Hataya.
Jeez.
Ka I adultu ye hayatk uti achtu niku hasawati. Tringet yu hatangi hlech ade at has uksi ye hayatk hak ashiyi ka hash kalnik al ek llech has aguch saku hayatk Gau llech au gwal du yadi. Llech has awul un ka llech has awust ek hayatk Shana Shanach ye hayawaka. Du sik llech awuswat du kla. Llech du ik at wultu du llechku. Du toowú ac a cawl liwall ha lichku. Kunachawe has yahlich ishan.
Jeez, kecha. Latseen day no way you kait at jeez, kecha. So kekwash, hoot. Jeez, Tlein you hon. Kecha.
I have a question about the different words for school. And what is the word? Is there a word for the residential boarding school?
We haven't actually, as far as I know, come up with one yet. I can ask some speakers if they have heard anything. The other day I was calling it ushik'éiyi sgóon, which would be a terrible school. Or I'd call it ushik'éiyi, the place where they killed off our culture, our way of living. Just to try and emphasize what the intention was with a lot of these things. And, bringing our language to sort of talk about this stuff, I know can be very triggering. And I know it can be very, very difficult. As these sort of times come about, we start leaning in towards Indigenous Peoples Day and Orange Shirt Day and these things. I think it kind of becomes our responsibility to utilize our language to talk about those things in a way that sort of allows us to examine them through tringet tundatani and to execute some of the healing practices of our language. So last night, one of the things that we talked about when the advanced class was doing the same exercise, so they had the same hard task that you folks did. I really encouraged them to go out and walk on the land, and maybe go harvest some medicines. So after the first frost, the tz'ikshashtin, the Hudson Bay tea, and the kachweich, the high bush cranberries, they're more sweeter than before. So it's a good time to go harvest those things. And sometimes just getting on the land really helps and using the language. But to sort of try and avoid the pitfalls of spiraling into any sort of depressions, the idea here, so we really want to ask our ancestors for help. So a long time ago, I was talking with this Lakota elder in Minneapolis. Wasa yechakach tuneya hakusti dat. How are we going to work around our culture and do some of this, some anti-racism work at the United Nations? And I said, how are we going to do this work and not just be angry all the time? And she said, how? Toowú. Yati gwash. Wait, ox gwash yana 8 would do it leaky. Atunacha yadutin. Yatayachoe toowú. Wait, Khan. Gwash Khan ayakudachoe yishat. Joya kaudziduk aya toowú. Kashdasa atunacha gwaha. Achoe chatak to taught away. Ach the gunk. Heated the she. Cliff gohas. Ach to wasagu. Ach jidach aya yida yayi. Akawe ach nak aya kukwagut. Wait wait ushik'éiyi at kesha ayich usti. Chago kago ach ahas to wasagu. Ha has how shushahihi. Achoe kesha tua ashku that nik khan dasa has hajit has our teach ak. So she said, your spirit is like a hollow reed. And so I just said, when I say, like, if you took a piece of Yana 8 or this thing called tziksh, don't mess with tziksh unless you really know what you're doing. It'll kill you. But if there's something that turns you to stone and you look through it with that, you won't turn to stone. So that's some old school knowledge. However, I said if you broke those, you could look through them. It's like that. And if you hold on to anger and pain, this is what she told me, it's like it just gets plugged up. How it's a dick. So what she would do is she said, I get up every morning and I pray to my ancestors to come and take this anger and take this pain from me. Hasaya kanachawe latseen. Has to dachhan kiyan kunachawe has asachan. Achoy heshwasap koti has khiwusi. They're strong. They're really strong, our ancestors. And they love their grandchildren. So I think sometimes if we really love our ancestors, so it just seems like illogical to say, take all this negative stuff. But what she was telling us is it's not our responsibility to pack that stuff around. Even though a long time ago, some people wanted to just annihilate completely indigenous peoples, they gave that to people, not just indigenous peoples, everybody walks around with some of this stuff. And she said, collectively, it's our job to ask for help and ask them to pack it away from us. Like I think about those people who pack over those trails, like the Chilkoot Trail and everything. That's part of our work, is to find some of these things that burden us, that slow us down, that keep us from speaking, that keep us from being confident in ourselves and our abilities, and that just have a lot of, there's so much pain and loss, just taking people's children, that's a real hard thing to do to people. And so to sort of start thinking about the reasons why would bring that stuff into our language is because our language has healing properties and abilities. It allows us to communicate with ancestors and ask them to help us with these burdens. That's the whole thing, not to We won't do this kind of stuff very often, but I do think it is helpful to learn how to do this stuff in Tlinget. And if you're going to use the language, you got to use it to talk about everything. So we can talk about winning at bingo. We can use it to talk about basketball games, and you learn how to say in jest, or maybe not. We're gonna beat you guys, right? And so, but we should be able to do all this stuff in Tlinget. Like it can't just be the classroom stuff. It's gotta be sometimes the heavy stuff. We call it ushik'éiyi. It's sensitive. But then sometimes it's other stuff too, just having fun, teasing each other. Sometimes being able to say things that are naughty to some people. But that's the whole intention of this exercise, and the other class is doing it as well. And I know it's tough, but I really appreciate y'all sharing your words, and I do think that by releasing these things, Janak, Ye'awachana Eichini aya, Eichini katpagud, Chat, Achleyesh, Kingisti du Yitas, Tlein ayewuti, Tlein awechu, Yewaha yausaka, Ashini gachi art, Adata way to Yitla at Chadasa Klesh ituwa Ashku atiguti on. Ya Eichini tade, Janak. I dachaya kuchlahash. Wahini dachi guti, a dataya to gachitlaat, da sayi to wasagut hisati, a gaye quati, at hisati the kat yuhan, at hisati. A joyi in kachanik ata. So the first time I was put into the water by my uncle, Tlein, he told us, you see, you can go in that water. It's going to be cold. When you go in that water, think of all these things you don't want to carry around anymore. And you let them go. Sometimes it's a metaphor, but it's a very real thing. And they'll just drift away from you. Now, I think the key for a lot of people is when you do stuff like that, you got to really let it go. You can't just sort of say, but then you grab all your trauma and you haul it back out of that water. But you got to really let it go, which I think is hard for a lot of people. I think it's really hard for indigenous peoples because we've lost so much stuff. Sometimes I think it feels like if we let go of the trauma, it's just losing one more thing. But I think that trauma, actually letting go of that trauma, because he said, when you come out of that water, think of what you want to become and become it. And I share this stuff with you. Shkateh Jessie Johnny, she used to call me before almost every class I taught. And she'd give me encouragement, especially when I was first getting started here. 11 years ago. Didn't know what I was doing. Still don't know what I'm doing. Just insider secret. But she would say, long time ago, our people soaked in the icy waters for strength. And that's what you all are doing there, learning our language. So she was so happy that we were doing this and that we were transitioning. As brilliant and as beautiful as other people were, we were transitioning from non-Indigenous peoples leading the programs to Indigenous peoples leading the programs. So I share that stuff with you, and I receive the words that you shared, and the idea is to kind of keep this whole thing moving. So, any other thoughts or questions, things you want to talk about? Anything that happened on Thursday?
Did I add something? My granddaughter is my grandmother, and my great granddaughter is my mother. And it is my responsibility to make it so it's not the same as what they suffered in their other lifetime. That's what drives me. So it's good that we pass on the names. So Gachgoon is Bessie Visaya, my grandmother, and Antu is my great granddaughter, and that is my mom's name.
Goodness, sheesh. Yeah, and part of our work is making sure that we are receiving the things from the past that we should be carrying around and then giving those to the future generations. And that's a lot of the work that we're doing. So it's just easier and easier and easier, hopefully. I don't know, some people say, and I tease sometimes too, because I'll be like, wow, it's like a clinking to carry all these books. It's just a thing. I think it's a trope to say everybody's got it so easy nowadays. But I think, shouldn't we want to make it easier for future generations? Isn't that part of our work? To say, don't suffer as I did. But then I think sometimes that becomes like, you're lazy because you didn't suffer. And I think there's something to that. And I think there's something to learning in America where there's suffering is expected to sort of get you up a level. And I think we need to sort of, even though we soak in the waters, and that's not, if you're going on the icy water, that's like a whole other thing. But I think, just stuff worth talking about and examining now and then. Okay.
I just wanted to say genocidal for those words of encouragement, just as a elementary teacher. Just, we talked about this at Ida's class on Friday about making sure all of our children know what assets they are and what gifts they are, and that before we talk about such difficult things, that they have a strong foundation of knowing this richness of who they are, where they're from, so that when we talk about these difficult things, they have another vision of who they are, that like the schools aren't just focusing on, but they have the strength to handle those. And so anyway, I was trying to think as a teacher, like, what would I want to say? And I couldn't come up with the words. And so the phrases you put were just really beautiful. So I just want to say genocidal, and I feel like those are words that I want to teach my children, in school, and that they can encourage each other and hold each other up as we deal with the healing and moving forward from them. So genocidal.
Okay. Well, tomorrow we're going to do 100 positive phrases that were gathered by a lot of different people. So then I know we've been doing the tough stuff, so we're going to try and fill up your berry bucket full of good things. And I did say this, I want to sort of just issue a light challenge, just for fun. Let me try to make this bigger. So I said this to you folks. Where are we going to put that? Okay. Ushik'éiyi, ushik'éiyi in kachwanik. What do you think that says? And any parts we recognize is all good.
I think of unique, but that's not what is this wanique. Is it unique, sad, or feeling sick?
Well, that neek would have a W on the end.
Okay.
Is it something to tell? Will tell?
Yeah, away.
And then ushik'éiyi is that is why.
That is why.
That is why tell.
Just put all the pieces here. I have to make this a little smaller. Hold on.
ushik'éiyi is you are.
Yeah, you all are.
That is why. Yeah, ushik'éiyi.
So when we go through this, ushik'éiyi.
Ushik'éiyi is this is why.
So this is a thing. The first one, I'm gonna figure out how to do this. Like what I should do. Hold on. Let me actually just try it. So I'm gonna get rid of this. Hold on. I'm gonna show you a little walkthrough on how you might be able to just sort of look at these parts. I've got to. It's a little awkward with the zoom, so I'm gonna put the zoom cameras down here. Okay. So I'm gonna build myself a little table. I'm gonna get a nadak going down here. I think you only need maybe 3, maybe 2. I'll try 3. And then put all this stuff in. It's going to be a little messy. Bear with me. But I'm going to show you how to unmessy this thing. So what I'm going to try to do is put everything in its own little box. And I'll make it bigger so that y'all could see. And the verbs got to stay together. And I'm going to keep that together, probably. So I'll probably do it like this. Now it's probably not readable yet. That might be pretty good. Make that a little smaller. And actually the être part, it's kind of part of the verb, so hold on a second. So my idea here is to break this into 3 pieces, right? So we could kind of see what are the individual pieces. Phase 2 would be to sort of start looking through what those things do. So as we sort of learn how to do this, this is just one more way to sort of start thinking about how we can look at the language, find the parts, so we can see how they work with the idea of eventually putting them together ourselves. So we have this verb, which if we just pull apart the ushik'éiyi, what is the yi part doing here?
Plural, you all.
Y'all, right? So you all, so we do have a you all, however we're going to say that. And this is a second person plural object pronoun. So sometimes we're going to code that stuff in there. Like it's an object pronoun, it's part of that verb. That's what kind of ye, that's what kind of y'all it is. Okay? And then we have the city verb. There's different ways, you know. So one thing that we could do, I guess I do need a 4th one. Hold on. So you go up there. So we could use one line just to say, what are all those little pieces? So we have a classifier. Well, I'm going to back up. So the ut is a thing. So the thing is a 4th person, non-human, independent pronoun, right? And some of this stuff, it's a little bit coded. I know that this part, there's 2 kind of parts to what we're doing here. One is called a segment, and one is called a gloss. Segment means stretch it apart to see all the little pieces that are there. The gloss means translate every single little part into what that thing is. And sometimes it's kind of not so much focused on meaning, it's focused on what's the grammar function of that thing. So we could start to see. So when I mark down a classifier, I'll say CL. Then what the parentheses does, it just gives a little bit of detail. What type of thing is this? This is an S classifier in the I mode. Sit. And you'll start to see this stuff. It's an S group classifier. That means it's not the yati verb to be, it's the city verb to be one of these things. Okay? And then T is to be. So when I put this together, so we have thing, oh, there's also, there's a little chunk on here. There's a suffix, it has a fancy name, it's called essive. All that you need to know is this suffix ties to the verb to say one of those things, one of those types of things. Is really what this one kind of does. So if you say, ushik'éiyi, y'all are human beings. Y'all are Tringet speakers. If you were all the same clan, I might say genocidal. You all are genocidal. These are just examples. Toowú. You all are speakers. So that underline X can attach to any kind of noun to say you are one of these things. So with that, thing The little X marker, you all be. How do you think that translates? This is one of those phrases where probably the literal meaning is not really the same as what that means. By literal, I mean what do all those little parts add up to? What they add up to is you are a thing. That's what it means. Y'all are a thing. But when you say ushik'éiyi, this means you all are really something. And that means you are special, important. There was a recording I did of a Tringet speaker who is also a carver, an artist. And he was talking about when he would make art. It's what it means to do a team. Sometimes people see there's really something there. So it's an interesting thing. To really be something. So you all are really something. You all are important. The uch is because there are some instances. There are instances where uch sometimes means what you're doing the thing with. Achat dischaat, the thing that people eat with. So you get it from context. So usually it's one thing. It's either the thing that you do something with, or because. Whenever you have achaway or achaya, those things in combination would be that is why, or this is why. Achaya, this is why. Achaway, that is why. Or because of that, because of this. So we're just going to say because, and then I'd probably say this is a focus marker, and there, and then I would put it back into English. Oops. Into that is why, or because of that, however you want to think of it. What kind of, hold on, got one more thing to do here. What kind of ye is that ye right there? Shall think.
Second person plural pronoun.
Second person plural possessive. And we might not have seen this yet. And so these are things that we're sort of maybe a little bit new to us. This ye-een, ye-ee-day, ye-eat, ye-ee. Whenever you see those two things together, i-een, i-eat, ach-eat, ach-een, ach-ee-day, any of those things, the first one will be a possessive. So you alls. So this thing, and we're going to look at how all this works too. This double E thing, E, you hear in a bunch of verbs. I'it kuaha, ach eat yan uaha, ach eat itishik, i'in kakquanig. What those two E's do together, the only reason they exist is so you can put a suffix on the end. So you'll see eat, ich, in, ide, idach, inach, maybe. We call it the empty base because it doesn't mean anything. So sometimes it's there, but usually if you say like ye in, with y'all, ye eat, arriving at you all, ye eat day, towards you all, because you cannot put one of these suffixes that have to do with direction, sometimes time, cannot put those onto a pronoun or somebody's name or a kinship term. You can't say achtlan. You have to say achtla'in. That's what that ee thing does. okay? So when we write it, we're going to say empty vase with like that. Okay. Then we get ka, yu, cha, ya, ni. This will be the longest one. I think it's going to end up going over 2 lines, so I'll just drop it down here. So the ka is a surface. Usually like kind of a horizontal surface. It pops up on a whole bunch of verbs. It has to do with a surface. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's kind of not so clear. Like, why do I tell it on a surface? I don't know. The next thing is the perfective marker. And whenever we do this stuff, it's interesting because it does get very long. If you look at the beginning Tlinget workbook, like it tries to stretch it out into a whole bunch of lines and sort of put them kind of right underneath each other. It tries to a little bit. The perfective marker marks the verb mode. And in this case, it means we're going to look at this verb in terms of whether or not it has happened. And it has because you have the y and the plus I version of the classifier. Those two things combine to say the verb happened. Next to the perfective marker, what do you guys think the cha thing does? I. This is I. This is the subject, so it's I. And we're going to say, oh, there's actually a thing on there, sorry. I forgot there's a thing on there. It's it, which is a third person object. Surface, perfective, I. First person singular subject. The classifier, this is a 0 group in the I form, and then tell. That's a lot, right? That's a lot. When you start to just sort of tease those things out and take a look at them, it's helpful, but sometimes when you first start doing it, it's just sort of, it can be a bit much sometimes. I understand that. I will put this slide up so you folks can have it, take a look at it, think about it a little bit more. I might make these things a little bit smaller so they kind of fit together. Okay. So if we have y'all's, with, it, I, perfective, tell. What do you think we've got here as far as translating this into English? Y'all are really something. That is why I told you all. Or I told it to you all. So you got to kind of add a few more things in there once you move it into English. Those things are in there in Tlinget, but it just treats them a little bit differently. So as we were sort of talking, as I was telling you some of the stuff about the reactions to some of the stories, talking about trauma and racism and horrible things, and then I was sharing some stuff that I was taught, and then I told y'all, ushik'éiyi, ushik'éiyi kachwani. You all are really something. You're important. That is why I told it to you. Any questions?
On the cha in the first example, or the cha, I thought I read you couldn't use that with formal nouns, like ushik'éiyi. Or am I getting that mixed up with something?
Yeah. So this thing goes, you could put any clan in front of that, oops, and then you put the ch at the end. So yeah, ushik'éiyi sati. They are ushik'éiyi.
Oh, you can do that then.
Yeah, ushik'éiyi chatzati. You should. You have to do that.
Okay.
But if you say, that's why you say yesh nach chatzati. Yesh, raven, na, tribe. That links the verb there. And that could also be a type of person. could say ushik'éiyi. That's an angry person. There's angry inside. You could say, what did I say? Tlein? Tlein. That's a kind person. Ushik'éiyi. That's an angry person. You could say ushik'éiyi. That's a good person. You could say nouns. That's an alcoholic. Like these can work for like categories, types of people as well. Careers, ethnicities, clans. It works for all of those types of things. It means I am one of, they are one of these things.
It always attaches to a noun, right?
Yeah. And you shouldn't be putting stuff in between that marker and the verb. So you shouldn't really be saying shukach adich achawe ushik'éiyi hasati. It just breaks it apart and it gets lost. You might see an owe or something in between, but it's pretty rare.
But that first yay is not separated. That's
This
part of the city, yay city.
So this ye, is that what you're
Yeah,
talking?
ye, sorry.
That's the object pronoun. So the object pronoun can go there.
Okay.
So I could say atchatziti. I wouldn't say that. I'm really something. You could, but grammatically you could. Don't say that. Right? We try not to brag about ourselves. But you could say at. I could change this to isiti. Right? So now you are really something. But now this should change to you. Right? So it's just sort of like switch that, so I need to switch that. I could say at chasati. Ach away has to in kachwani. Does the same thing. Matching those pronouns just creates that logical flow. Part of it has to be recognizing which type it is, which is why we do all this stuff to open up the sausage casing and take a look at what's in there.
So in my intro, when I say dakhla shah, it should be dakhla shah.
Yeah. Shach chatzati. Okay.
Kune.
Ah.
This could probably be after the break, but as I'm trying to translate into Tlinget my thoughts and using the online dictionary for verbs, is there an easy way? Like if you're looking for like third person plural and it's not listed there, is there like a way to figure it out based on what kind of verb it is? Because that's the sticking point for me. It's like if it's not listed on all of those different options, I feel like I don't have anything to grab onto, and maybe I'm missing the link to going, okay, because it's written this way for singular second person or whatever, then I should be able to figure out the others. So if there is a hook that I can hold on to, I think that would be really helpful, because I feel like, gosh, if I could figure that out, then I'd feel so much more confident. Like, yeah, I can look these up and I can translate them. But I'm like, okay, send it to Kune, send it to Kushik. So just to share if there's something I'm missing. Good cheese.
So here's the key. It's like, I think that this thing is the key, right? So when you see that capital O, when you see that capital S, these are the things you could change them to. And so there's a couple of things as far as how we're coding this stuff. And so there's a code, and then part of our work is to teach you the code, which is jarring for some people because they're like, that's the roof marker, and then there's an S, and then there's a little s, and then there's 6 different 0 markers in there, and I understand it gets overwhelming sometimes. But as we go through an exercise like this, and we start looking at a verb, and we'll say cha, cha, I, cha, a, cha. And you can't just, and the thing with Tlinget, it's not like you just change one thing, right? sometimes that will trigger another change. So the goal is we sort of start walking through verbs, and then we take a break. We'll say, hey, let's learn some possessive suffixes, because that's like a totally different thing. And it's actually, even though there's a whole bunch of steps to it, it's pretty straightforward. Then we start looking at direction and location, around, about, under, over, towards, from, because that just sort of takes our mind in this other direction. Then we keep coming back to verbs, so that when you look at this, you see chat, ha, yi, zero or ka or k, at, and sh. Those are your main options for object pronouns, who, to whom the verb happens, right?
And so the verb doesn't change. I think for me, I'm always using we, because I'm working in a classroom with a lot of kids, and so then the verb doesn't change. Like I could look at what it is for singular, and the verb root and stem would stay the same, but I just change the pronoun.
Yes. So as
Okay.
long as you're not switching the mode, like you're not going to switch it to a perfective or to a future, then you're looking here. The object, because it sits in front of the verb, doesn't impact it really as much, but because this is in between this stuff and the classifier, it does. And so that's when it starts to jump around and do some stuff like that. So as we start to sort of move through how this stuff works, we'll look at this thing and we'll go through these examples, right? So this was the eating verb. So we've got capital O. You can put an object there. This is a verb where you're probably not going to put an object in there very much, unless you're like, I'm going to eat you, potato. You know, like maybe you do. I don't know. Ikwacha. Monsters say that sometimes. We say it with the kids, like we play that game, like what's the time, Mr. Wolf? And then, you know, I might say, Atchakawuaya, Yikwacha. I'm going to eat you all up. But typically you wouldn't. But so as we look through and how does changing that subject, how does that affect the verb? And so when you look up a verb, like we'll just go sort of, I had this verb open to pick berries. So this could also be picking ushik'éiyi. This could be picking seaweed. So if you look something up and you see een, that een part will not change. You could say cha'een, tu'een, e'een, ye'een, hasa'een, du'een. Those are all the ways you can change the subject. This part does not change. So the goal, one of my goals is to sort of get you folks to be comfortable with that. So once you look it up in the third person, say, I could change that. I could change it. We could go picking, y'all could go picking, you could go picking, you know, all those different things. It gets a little bit trickier once we look at like a perfective. So we see awa in. So that one would be hua in, watua in, iya in, yi in, awa in, hus awa in, wadua in. But we're going to work up to that. So that's the game plan. We start working through these verbs, see how you could change them, then show you the perfective and how to build that, so that the goal would be, if you just looked at this right there, you could do all of it. So to learn a new verb in Tlinget, you would look at that information and you would know which kinds of things you need to put in which parts of your brain. Like, this affects it this way, this affects it that way. Then when you go in, you should be able to do this perfective, future, imperfective, and change it for any person, you know, anyone could be doing it. That's the goal.
Was the perfective hard in that one just because of the nature of this specific verb, or just because the perfective in general tends to move around more?
Primarily because the perfective marker pops up here. So there's still going to be an object. Now you introduce a perfective marker. Then that's going to, so you're going to have yu plus cha gets hua. Y plus t gets wutu, usually wutua. W plus I gets you either iya or yi. W plus y gets you yi, or if you're from Tlein, ying. 0 gets you woo, or if there's nothing there. But if you have third person and third person, you're going to have awa or ausa or something. But yeah, that's the reason why the perfective, because then you introduce something there and you gotta, now it's like if you start here at the root marker, if you have more than 3 things to the left of that, something will probably contract. It's like a Dick Down, how he used to call it, the 3 strikes and you're out rule. If you get something more than 3, it's got to start contracting. But there's predictable ways that it does that.
Cheese, that's really helpful, Renee.
Okay. All right, better take 5 minutes. Take 5 minute time out. Get water, do a lap, do whatever you need to do. And we'll do suffixes.
So is the imperfective generally like one where, I guess right now with our level of understanding, we could play around with a little more?
The imperfectives tend to be easier because there's nothing in between them. Not every verb has an imperfective. And you kind of have to look at what the stem looks like and just memorize it.
Okay.
Okay, so we're coming back with one more thing. It's because I thought it'd be fun. So what does the Tlein thing do?
Negative.
Yes, so we'll
Not.
say not. We'll say not. That's one way to sort of, I think it's a pretty good way to look at it. What about wasus?
Cow.
Cow. Then we got this essive suffix. What is the 0 thing here?
Objects.
An object. So we'll say them or it. It's a third person object. Oops, that's 3. And it's important to know that that could, what am I doing? Can't talk and type. That a third person object can be human or non-human. Right, so it's important to know that. This little u, we call it the Irialis. It's got a fun little name. What this means is like there's some logical misalignment. So this will pop up for all, I guess an easy way to start thinking about it is verb is not that way. Specifically marking the verb has not happened. That's the way you start thinking about that. All negative forms have to have that thing in there. That's why you hear it'll pop up. That's why you have usti. When that thing is the only thing between it and a classifier with the A in it, it's actually going to just knock the letter right out of the classifier. That's an S classifier, and this is to be. So, how do you folks think we would translate this? Not cow, that thing that marks the verb to that noun, them or it. Specifically, verb is not that way, the classifier to be. Two ways.
It's not their cow?
No.
Close.
Not a cow?
You're not a cow.
It's not a cow. Or they are not a cow. We'll take this one step further, just because I heard this from an elder one time. Tlein kawanig, shakshani. Achla, achwawus, atli. One nach say atlechadena. Wasus latachani. Sgóon yig atlein adatki ayahas atenanuch. Wasus latachani. Achla yechat yasaka. Tlech wasus isti. Ajwe tlech wasus latachani idena. What did I do here? Then I'll translate the little story for you. There's one change that I need to reflect down below.
Change the object pronoun?
Change this to I. What does that do right here? I'll figure out a way maybe to sort of get them all to line up. You.
You were not a cow?
Second person singular. You are not a cow. This important phrase that you learned today. Anybody want to take a crack at the little story I told? Tlein away. What was that? Tlein away. Anybody recognize that?
Like once upon a time.
Yeah. Tlein on its own means once. But if you say Tlein away, and that's how you start. This one time, once upon a time. Shakshani, Khan Akawanik. Shakshani is a name. Her English name was March. That's Khan Akawanik could also be said Achin Akawanik. She told it to me. Atli. Wanach sawe kelchadena wasus chatachani. Atli. Wanach sawe kelchadena wasus chatachani.
Mom directly.
Yep, Mom.
Why
Why?
are you
Kelchadena. What's that?
Not drinking?
Not why don't I drink wasus chatachani.
milk?
Milk. Sgóon yig Tlein adatki has adananuch wasus chatachani. School. Sgóon yi. In the school. Tlein adatki has adananuch wasus chatachani.
Lots of children.
Lots of kids drink milk all the time. Achla yechat yosakha. Said this to me, Kech wasus isti. Achawe kech wasus atachani idena.
That is why.
You're not a cow.
You're not a cow. That is why you don't drink milk. She loved to tell funny stories, and she was amazing. Okay.
I really like that because it teaches me like how to listen while you're talking. Again, I don't worry about getting everything down perfectly, but that was helpful.
Right? Because sometimes we got to pull all the pieces apart, but then sometimes we just got to do chunk stuff. Like, let me just tell you something. And it's a cute little story. We'll do another one. Maybe we'll do it tomorrow, if I remember. We'll do some fun stuff tomorrow. For now, we got to do some other fun stuff. We're going to learn how to put suffixes on the nouns. That's our goal for the next 20 minutes. Everybody just repeat after me. Look at these things. Hit.
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 Douche. Douche. douche, salk, salk, hake, hake, tukt, te, te. Anything you don't know what it is? Everybody okay with those things? Salk is sometimes an unknown thing for coastal people. They're not around here.
Is it Mark?
I don't know what it is.
What is it?
Gopher. Or is it gopher?
Yeah, locally it's called a gopher. It is also called an Arctic ground squirrel. Make robes out of them. Long time. Somebody asked me today, like, what do we trap around here? It's like, and I started naming things, and they're like, no, to eat. I was like, well, you talking about now or a long time ago? Because we ate it all. That was, go back far enough. People, we're eating squirrels, we're eating beaver, and a lot of people still do. So it's a little ground squirrel.
Is that what you were saying earlier? Low bush moose or something? No.
Cranberries.
High bush cranberries.
I thought there was like a kind of funny term for that.
Is it, or no, Suffixes is Hudson Bay, right?
Yeah, ushik'éiyi is the Hudson Bay tea. Toowú is the high bush cranberries. Okay. Sgóon is sage. And it's so what would that translate to, like, literally? Sgóon. Ground squirrel medicine. Sometimes, though, that knock is used to say it's a thing that keeps it away. Nagu is mosquito repellent. Nagu is peppermint. I don't know if it keeps them away. I'm not gonna mess with that. But sgóon, but it could be maybe the thing uses it, maybe it keeps it away. I don't know. Okay. Here's our first three sets of suffixes. The second one is a suffix and a little word that comes after it. To make something small, you put this on it, K apostrophe. To make it plural, you put X apostrophe. To go, we'll change that. Little plurals, isani or usani. So we're going to go through this list of words, and we're going to make little ones, then we're going to make plurals, then we're going to make little plurals. So if I said hit is house, what would hit be with this K on it?
Little house.
Little house. Hit.
Houses.
What would that be? Houses.
Houses.
What about ushik'éiyi?
Little houses.
Little houses, right? Chukan anikahit. Little house on the prairie. There it is. Okay. I want to say something about plurals before we move into just sort of like grinding through these. In English, you have to pluralize if there's more than one, right? I see a cat, I see two cats. I have two cats, I have three dogs. Once there's more than one, you need to pluralize it. That is not the case with tringet. Ushik'éiyi. The only time you need to pluralize something is if it's important that people know that there are lots of them, or there's more than you can count. Otherwise, even if you said 100 of them, you know, Keichin Keka Wasus Ayewuti, there's 100 cows there. So not everything, it doesn't have to do it every time. But you just keep an eye on it, see when you notice it being used. You also don't need to pluralize body parts. Like you could say hajin, that's our hands. It's not our single hand. It just makes sense in tringet. Right? So here we go. We'll go one at a time. Start with littles. We're going to go all the way down. Little house, little dog, little ground squirrel. Little swan is fun to say. and then little rock. Hitka. Cake. Cake.
Cake.
Sashk.
Salt.
Sashk.
Sash.
You can have 2 consonants and even 3 right in a row. And you do not put a vowel there. Sometimes people want to go sashk. They want to just put some kind of sound in there. That just happens sometimes. Like here. So you go from to right in a row. Don't even get any breath, no vowels, no nothing. I was teasing the Hawaiians because they said, we have 13 sounds in our language. I was like, lots of vowels. You guys got lots of vowels. We'll loan you some consonants if you ever need any, because we got lots. Now watch how this one changes. Take. Take. What is different about that one? It went short high to long low. If you put a suffix on a short high vowel, it will go long and low. It's just something that happens. Just keep that in mind. You're going to have some of these rules that are just sort of rolling things, okay? Everybody all right? Okay, let's do plurals. Hit. Hit. Cake. Cake. Sush. Sush. I have to wash this mask tonight. So hard to do with a mask on. I forgot this one. I had to zoom home to get it because I can't do it with the different thing. Okay. Here come the swans. What do y'all think the rocks are going to be? Hey. Hey. All of y'all are going to become very accurate predictors. As we predict things in Tlinget, just a reminder, go for it. Because you can't go, hey, because now you've messed up the tone in the word. That's what you do in English if you don't know. In Tlinget, you got to go for it. We're all learning anyways. If you need to, you could say, everybody say, guaxier, 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 guaxier. Anybody tell me what that means? Maybe. If you ask my kids, I tell you it means no. Because they're like, can we do this? Guaxier. Does that mean no?
Isn't the maybe that expresses doubt?
It usually does express doubt. So you could say kshe, and that's sort of like, I believe so. You could say shakde. That's maybe yes, maybe no. And you could say gouache or gouachier. Gouachier is on its own. Gouache attaches to a verb. And you're saying maybe, but I kind of doubt it. Good question. Okay. Here come the little plurals. It says diminutive, and I'm going to switch it all to little. Why do we need the big words? Okay. Guk is big enough.
The swans give me tears.
If the vowel at the end of the word is not a U vowel, you should have I, san. If it's a U vowel, which is N-E-U or double O, you should have san. Okay? Hitkisani. Hitkisani.
Isani.
sgóon,
Isani.
ushik'éiyi.
Isani.
I think that should be a U. Yeah, it's so far from the other consonant. Isani.
Isani.
So the last one, there are some things that it just becomes a whole other concept, kind of. So isani is pebbles. They're cute little, and these are cute little things. So what is the word atcha? Food. So what do you think? Well, first of all, let me just put it on here. Hold on. How am I going to do this? Text. Oh, that's not colored. That's not helpful. Okay, so I'm going to find a little spot here. I'll just put it right here. So this is atcha. Okay, so atcha is food. So we kind of talked about a rule here. If I wanted to put this sani on there, what is going to happen?
Long low.
So it should go long, low, and then we're going to get this and this. Ushik'éiyi. Ushik'éiyi. Snacks. That's how you say it. Snacks. Little foods. They're so cute. Little foods. Any questions about that? On yetku sani. That's where that word comes from. It follows this whole set of rules. Here's some other nouns. Everybody repeat after me. Let's say them once. Douche. Wait. Cheech. Hit. Sate. Heat. Hoots. What does a douche in English?
Cat.
Wait.
Bag.
Bag. Cheech.
Merlet. No,
Porpoise.
dolphin.
Khan is a dolphin. Cheech is a porpoise. Hit. House. Sate.
Bracelet.
Necklace? Is that what they have? Yep. Keat.
Killer whale.
Killer whale. Hoots.
Beer.
Brown bear. Yea, a whale. Okay. So one of the things that we talk about is spelling and tringet. Letter recognition. This stuff becomes really important. I think you can read and write tringet pretty fast because it's like got this one sound, one symbol relationship. Every symbol represents one single sound. So every sound has its own symbol. But we're not counting the characters. We're counting the letters that combine to make a sound. So douche, these are all three-letter words. Right? So if you look at that, you should be able to see it. Because when we note the vowel, we are noting three things. What type of vowel? It's 4 types. The A vowels, the E vowels, the I vowels, the U vowels. So sometimes we'll say any kind of U vowel, that means ooh, all of them. The other thing we mark is vowel length, 1 or 2. The third thing is the tone, high or low. What you're going to see, sometimes it moves around. It's usually very predictable. Okay, the GW is a single sound. The CH is a single sound. So one of the things that you can practice as you look at a word is you could just count the letters. Because sometimes you're just memorizing a bunch of names. The name of this, the name of that, the name of this. And sometimes you're like, how many letters is that? Chasha chasha. How many letters? So you could write it out, count them. Each of the vowels is a single letter, even if there's two vowels. Any questions about that? But then we can also teach folks how to write in Tlingit pretty consistently. Because we don't want things where sometimes people will ask me to say things or name something, and then I'll name it. I get grumpy if they say that's too hard. Can you name it something else? No, do the hard stuff. But then I'll also get a little bit grumpy if they say, can you write it phonetically? But I don't want to get mean. I'll say, well, Tlingit is a phonetic alphabet. If you just learn what sounds go to this symbol, then you got it. Because I don't want to say dakka and write D-U-C-K, right? But I do understand, because sometimes as people have written names and written other things, like sometimes you'll just write it how it sounds to you. But then as we sort of try and interpret that later, like say somebody's no longer with us or something, we got to look at their notes. If we don't know how they were thinking about it, we might get it a little bit off. So if we take this set of words, well, I'll say them. Kate, Sashk, Kokt, Shleq, Yesh, Sa, Ah. Okay, translate these. What's Kate? Og. Sashk.
Ground squirrel,
Ground squirrel. Kokt.
swan,
Shleq.
snapper,
Red snapper or yellow eye, rockfish. Yesh. Raven. Saw.
seal,
Ah.
lake,
Lake. So we can look at these again. Kate, 3-letter word. Sashk, 4-letter word. Kokt, 4. Shleq, 3. Yesh, 3. Saw, 2. Ah, 1. It's a 1-letter word. Just sort of continuing to drive this stuff and think about it, just so we can just hone in on our spelling. So we hear somebody, you learn to speak Tlingit, people know about it. Hey, can you help me spell my name? Hey, can you help me spell this thing? Hey, what's this? And you're going to have to be there as a resource for the people. But there's another way we can write this stuff. Sometimes we do. The C is a consonant. The V is a vowel. You have to start focusing on some of this stuff too. So we can mark the vowel as long, short, low, high. This is going to come into play later. Remember we talked about perfective? One of the things with like a perfective verb, you will be able to predict whether it's going to be tin or teen. You're going to predict that. And part of that is by writing it sometimes like this. Okay? A V is just a vowel. A V with that tone mark means it's a high tone vowel. C is a consonant. So it's just another way to look at the words and just sort of think about them. Consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant. Sometimes we might have to mark that there's an apostrophe there too, because that will affect some things, especially at the end of a verb. That gets us to this. This is the little cheat sheet that tells you pretty much all of the rules for making the possessive or relative suffix onto a noun. So the big thing you have to know is the word open or closed. And what does that mean? Open, closed. What is that talking about?
open ends in a vowel and closed ends in a consonant.
Yes. So if there's a vowel at the end, it's open. If there's a consonant at the end, it's closed. Tlingit doesn't, it allows both. A language like Hawaiian does not allow closed endings. And there's several other languages that do. So if they bring a word into the Hawaiian language, it must end. So the beer must become pia. That's just how it's going to happen. But for tringet, we do have to pay attention. So the first thing I would say, to think about the possessive suffix, I would say think of it as you add the letter I. That's what you do. That's the starting point. If the word ends with a vowel, you have to put a Y in front of it. So you should expect it to be y instead of I. Okay? If it has a rounded ending, which usually means there's a W on there, like gao, then it should be a U instead of an I. So it's an I, but if it's open, then it's y. If it's rounded, it's and if it's rounded and open, w. That's kind of not very common. But there are a couple words that have a hidden rounded ending. Ka, ach, toowú. It's just there. You just got to remember. There's not that many of them. Now here comes the tricky part. We're not going to get to the examples. I'll show you the examples. This set of rules will make a lot of sense once we just start seeing it in action. When you start running through some practice nouns, you'll be able to predict them with very high accuracy. Any U vowel with any form of a G, K, or X will always be considered a rounded end. Anything, any U, G or underline G, K, underline K, apostrophe, whatever, X will have a rounded ending. The last thing, there's a set of consonant endings, CH, K, underline K, T, TL, TS, that will switch to the voiced pair. Just like dog becomes dogs, a similar thing occurs in tringet. So if you have cheech, you should expect it to go cheej. If you have kook, you should expect koog. That K will change to a G. If you have, I guess I'll just do kook, then you'll have kook. It'll switch to an underlined G. If you have hit, you should expect ach, hidi, changes to a D. TL, cake. Ach, kedle, changes to a DL. Hoots, ach, hoodzi. We're going to do some examples. Nobody's saying you own a bear or anything like that. We're just using them for language examples. We'll stop here, but we will walk through all of these. It'll be next week, because tomorrow's a Super Smash class. We're going to do some fun stuff as a gang. The rules will make sense. You can come back to this sheet if you need to, but you'll actually be able to internalize these, I think, pretty quickly. And then you'll be able to, you can own anything now, linguistically, not like philosophically.
You can make a game of tringet Monopoly.
Yeah, right? Ushik'éiyi, ushik'éiyi, ushik'éiyi. But so many things. You already know how to do this. Kusti, life. Ha kusti ends with a high tone. You got to put the yi on there. That pushes that high tone I to go long and low. Oh, here's the last thing. This one's kind of fun. The tone of this suffix will always be the opposite of the tone before it. Hidi, nechi. That's just the way it goes. Ushik'éiyi, that's gonna cheesh. Hucha.
Kune, for tomorrow, is there anything that we need to like prepare or to think about preparing for.
Just bring your best self, which is just yourself. We'll have everything ready. We'll just do
Okay.
some fun stuff. We're gonna come up with some challenges. We're gonna come up with some things to do. If you think of, while we're getting together and sort of doing this first one, and if you think of things that you think would be fun to do as a language group that's kind of large, let us know. We'll have a few things cooked up. We'll probably look at a story, probably do some stuff to get to know each other, we'll probably break up into little groups and issue challenges to each other just for fun. And then we'll probably look at 100 inspirational phrases.
Asaneix, genocidal.
Oh, let's see. I think
We'll just get going on the midterms.
let's say for your midterm, you think you folks are ready to write a one-page letter? Can you do that? Start thinking about who you would write a one-page letter to in Tlinget, and then just kind of get started on it. Don't go for like super big, crazy things like, if only it were this way, it could have been. Don't do anything like that. Just keep it really straightforward. But think about who you want to write that to. Maybe get started working on it. Just know we're all going to help each other. Nobody has to feel isolated or scared. There's no competition. There's no way to fail unless you just stop coming for whatever reason. But I'll try to find you if you do. So don't worry and don't try to put any pressure on yourself. It's just something to share ideas and try things out, which is all we try to do. Okay, ushik'éiyi. Unless you're already there.
Cheese.
Get a dog then. Gonna cheese.
Ushik'éiyi.
Ushi.
Ushik'éiyi.
I have a keyboard. I just don't know how to type with the keyboard. I'm like